Hey guys, tonight we are diving deep, and I mean deep into the heart of the Roman Empire. We're going past the gleaming marble columns of the Senate and the triumphant arches you see in movies. We're heading straight for the grimy, torch-lit back alleys, into a world where survival was a daily, desperate fight. Tonight, you're not a senator or a legionary. You are a woman on the absolute low or strung of Roman society, and you're about to discover that the grandeur of Rome was built on a foundation of that, well, a lot of things you wouldn't want to step in. It's a journey into a world where, let's be honest, your 21st century immune system probably wouldn't last a day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to see you in the comments. Let me know what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where our little history community spans. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you isn't the sight of Rome, but the smell. It's a complex, overwhelming wave of scents: wood smoke from 1,000 chimneys, roasting meat from a street-side vendor, the sharp tang of wine from a cracked amphora, and underneath it all the persistent, sour odor of unwashed bodies, animal dung, and garbage. You're standing on a stone-paved street, but the stones are slick with a thin layer of grime. The noise is a constant with the clatter of iron-rimmed wagon wheels, the shouting of merchants hawking everything from cheap jewelry to live chickens, the murmur of a dozen different languages from every corner of the empire. You look up, and there it is, the architectural might of Rome. An enormous aqueduct, a true marvel of engineering, strides across the cityscape on its colossal arches, carrying fresh, clean water from the distant hills. It's a symbol of Roman power and ingenuity, a testament to their ability to tame nature itself. This is the mainstream history we all know: Rome, the city of unparalleled public work. But here's the thing you're learning fast: that clean water is destined for the opulent villas of the wealthy, the grand public fountains in the Forum, and the massive public bathhouses. It's not for you, not for the people living in the shadows of those great arches. You keep your head down and walk, navigating the crowd. You learn quickly to stay away from the sides of the street, especially when you pass under the towering, teetering apartment blocks known as insul. These poorly constructed buildings are stacked 6, sometimes 7 stories high, and their inhabitants have a rather direct way of disposing of household waste. A quick splash in a puddle nearby reminds you that chamber pots are often emptied straight out the window. In fact, that Roman law had specific provisions for people injured or killed by objects or liquids falling from above. A little-known fact is that you could sue the tenant of the upper floor for damages. But let's be real, who are you going to sue? And with what money? So, you just learn to listen for the warning shout of cave, beware, and hope for the best. The ground beneath your worn-out sandals is uneven. This is where you encounter one of those questions that historians still bicker about. In the grand central squares and along the main processional routes, the streets were paved with magnificent, tightly fitted basalt blocks. But here, in the working-class neighborhoods like the sub, you are where you're headed. The quality of the pavement is a subject of endless debate. Are you walking on cheap, poorly laid stones, packed dirt that turns to mud in the rain, or a compressed layer of gravel, broken pottery, and discarded oyster shells from generations of inhabitants? The truth is, it was likely a messy combination of all of the above. The only certainty is that it is never, ever truly clean. As you move deeper into the city's labyrinthine core, the sunlight fades, blocked by the height of the buildings. The air grows thicker, the smells more intense. You pass a bakery, and the warm scent of bread is a brief, beautiful comfort. Then you pass a fuller's shop or laundry, and the acrid stink of ammonia from aged urine, which they used as a cleaning agent, makes your eyes water. This is the reality of Rome, a city of majestic marble and pervasive muck, of divine temples and human squalor, all existing side by side. Your journey is taking you away from the light, towards a part of the city that doesn't appear on the official maps, towards a life that is barely recorded in the history books. You turn a final corner into a narrow, dark alley, and there, At the end of it, you see a heavy wooden door, a single, flickering oil lamp casting a faint reddish glow beside it. This is where your new life begins. The heavy wooden door groans open under the push of your hand, and you step from the dark alley into a different kind of darkness. The air inside is thick and hazy with smoke from a few sputtering oil lamps. It smells of stale wine, cheap perfume, and something else, a cloying, human scent of sweat and unbetinalted breath that seems to cling to the damp stone walls. For a moment, the low murmur of conversation stops. A few faces, pale and fleeting in the dim light, turn to look at you. A figure detaches itself from the shadows. H.E.S. not a large man, but he carries an aura of absolute authority. This is the Leno, the brothel keeper, your new owner. He circles you slowly, his eyes appraising you not as a person, but as an asset, a piece of property. He might poke your arm to check for muscle, or force your mouth open to look at your teeth. Then he begins to speak, his voice low and raspy, laying out the rules of your new existence. But he doesn't talk about clients or coin. He starts with a single, devastating word, infamia. He explains it to you not with legal jargon, but with cold, hard reality. Infamia means you are now officially a person of disgrace. You have been legally stripped of your honor. This isn't just a social stigma, it's a legal brand burned into your very identity. You are no longer a citizen with rights. You are a thing. You cannot vote, not that you ever could. You cannot make a valid will or inherit property. Most importantly, you cannot testify in a court of law. You cannot testify in a co-citizen. Your voice, in the eyes of Rome, has been silenced. You are a ghost, a shadow that can be seen and used, but never heard. This is the mainstream historical fact of your new life. The legal status of infames placed you, along with gladiators, on certain types of actors, outside the protection of Roman civil law. The Leno smirks, perhaps seeing the confusion and fear in your eyes. He tells you that your name, whatever it was, is gone. It will be registered on the official list kept by the censor. This is the weird, almost comically bureaucratic part of your degradation. Somewhere in a grand building, a magistrate, the very same official responsible for counting the population and guarding public morality, will have his scribe dip a reed pen in ink and write down your new, professional name next to a note marking your profession. You share this dubious honor with some surprisingly varied company. That woman huddled in the corner, she used to be a mime on a provincial stage. The man who guards the door, a former gladiator. All of you are bound together by this legal stain. It's a strange, sad club, and the membership fee is your humanity. But here, in the quiet despair of this moment, you start to wonder, does that high-end mighty censor in his clean toga really know who you are? Is there truly a comprehensive, empire-wide database of every single prostitute? This is where the academic debate lies. Some historians argue that this registration was a formal, rigorously maintained process, a key to love's social control. They point to legal texts and the writings of moralists as proof. They suggest that for the countless women in your position, especially in the sprawling, chaotic metropolis of Rome, infamia was more of a de facto state than a formally recorded one. The brand wasn't necessarily written in ink on a papyrus scroll, it was written in the sneer of the passerby, the slammed door of a respectable shop. The simple, brutal fact that you belong to a Leno. The historical consensus remains split on how systemated this process really was. Was it a meticulous filing system of shame, or just a legal term for a social reality that everyone already understood? The Leno doesn't care about such debates. He finishes his speech by gesturing to your clothes, the simple, worn tunic you arrived in. A woman, older and with tired eyes, comes forward and hands you a bundle of fabric. It's not the infamous toga that some Roman satirists claimed prostitutes wear. That was more of a literary trope, a symbol of a woman acting like a man in public. Instead, it's a brightly colored, almost garishly dyed dress. It's designed to be eye-catching and immediately identify your purpose to any man who sees it. As you are forced to change, stripping away the last remnant of your old life, you realize the truth. The infamia isn't a hot iron brand on your skin. It's this cheap, scratchy fabric. It's the new, common-sounding name the Leno just gave you. It's the invisible wall that has just slammed down between you and the rest of the world. You are marked, And that mark you suspect will be impossible to wash away. Now that you're properly marked, wearing the uniform of your new life, it's time to see the rest of your world. The Leno gestures with his chin. And the older woman with the tired eyes, you learn her name is Livia, tugs on your arm. She leads you away from the smoky front room, which serves as a sort of grim waiting area, down a short, narrow corridor. The air gets cooler here, the dampness seeping from the stone floor right through the thin soles of your sandals. The only light comes from another sputtering oil lamp set in a small niche in the wall, casting long, dancing shadows that make the hallway feel alive and menacing. You're descending. Not just socially but physically. You take a few shallow, uneven stone steps down, feeling the ground slope beneath your feet. This is a common architectural feature of Roman brothels, or lupanar. The mainstream understanding is that they were often located in the grimiest, most neglected parts of the city, the sub-URA, the Trasteva tucked away in basements or the ground floors of rickety apartment blocks. They were meant to be hidden, out of sight of respectable society. You're literally walking into the city's underbelly. The walls are rough-hewn stone, unplastered and cold to the touch. You can hear the distant, muffled roar of the city above, a constant reminder of the world you've left behind. Livia stops in front of a low wooden door, no taller than your shoulders. It's made of rough, splintered planks with a simple iron latch. She gestures for you to enter. As you duck your head and step inside, your eyes slowly adjust to the near-total darkness. There are no windows. The only air comes from the small gap under the door. This isn't just a room, it's a cell, a stone box. This will be your station, and here you encounter one of the oddest, most debated little details of this life, the hours of this life, the art on the walls. As your eyes adjust, you might see them faintly painted on the plaster, if you're really lucky enough to have plastered walls. They're explicit, erotic scenes. Historians have famous examples preserved by the volcanic ash of Pompeii. Show a variety of acts, almost like a menu. The popular theory, the one you'll find in most textbooks, is that these paintings served a practical purpose. In a multilingual city like Rome, where a sailor from Syria might not speak the same language as a girl from Gaul, these images provided a simple, universal way to communicate services and prices. It's a sad, practical form of advertising. But there's a weirder, more obscure theory that some scholars whisper about. What if the paintings weren't for the clients at all? What if they were for the women? Some have argued these frescoes might have been a form of instruction, a grim training manual for new girls. Others suggest a more psychological purpose, a way to dehumanize the act, to turn it into a mere transaction depicted on a wall, separating the woman's mind from what her body was forced to do. It's a chilling thought that this art was a tool of psychological control, not just a primitive catalogue. The academic world is still split. Were these paintings a manual, or a mind trick? As you stand in your cell, the faded figures on the walls seem to mock you. They're painted on passionate, stark contrast to the cold stone and colder reality. The corridor you came down is the brothel's main artery. It's narrow, barely wide enough for two people to pass. Along its length are several other doors identical to yours. From behind some, you can hear muffled noises, a low cough, a man's gruff voice, the creak of a rope bed. This is the layout of the classic lupe, a central hallway flanked by a series of small, individual cells. It's a design born of pure, brutal efficiency. It feels less like a building and more like a hive or a warren, a place designed to function, not for living. You look around your tiny space. There's barely enough room to turn around. A narrow stone ledge built into the wall serves as the bed. There's no mattress, just a thin, straw-filled sack that rustles when you touch it. It smells faintly of mold. In the corner, there's a small clay pot, presumably for your waste. That's it. No table, no chair, no personal space. This cell is not a place you live. It's a place you work. Your entire existence has been compressed into these few square feet of cold stone. The steps you took down into this basement weren't just a physical descent. They were the final steps of your journey away from the world of light and air, into a suffocating, permanent darkness. The heavy door swings shut behind you. and the latch clicks, a sound of finality that echoes in the silence. The latch clicks shut, and you're plunged into an almost absolute darkness. The only light is a thin, weak sliver that bleeds under the bottom of the door, not enough to remind you that another world exists outside. You stand still for a moment, letting your other senses take over. You can feel the cold radiating from the stone walls and the floor, a damp chill that seems to creep into your bones. The air is stagnant and heavy, thick with the smell of mildew and something sour you can't quite identify. You run a hand along the wall next to you. It's rough and uneven, slick with a fine film of moisture. This is your cell. Your wall. It's maybe 5 feet wide and 7 feet long. A cramped, stone-lined box. In one corner, as your eyes slowly adapt, you can make out the shape of the built-in stone ledge that serves as a bed. It's barely wider than your shoulders. Lying on it is the thin pellet you noticed earlier, a coarse burlap sack filled with straw. You press down on it, and the straw crackles dryly. It's lumpy and uneven, and you can already imagine the way stray stalks will poke through the fabric, scratching at your skin while you try to find a moment of rest. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a breeding ground for pests, a fact you'll become intimately familiar with later. The mainstream historical view, largely confirmed by the archaeological evidence from places like Pompeii, is that this setup was standard. The cells, or cellei metrici, were designed for maximum occupancy and minimum comfort. They were purely functional spaces. Privacy was a foreign concept. The walls are thin, you can hear the faint sounds from the next cell over. The shuffle of feet are low windows, no source of natural light or fresh air. This was intentional. It disconnected you from the passage of time, from the world outside. Day and night bleed into one another, marked only by the changing shifts of work, the comings and goings in the corridor. You explore the rest of your tiny domain. In the opposite corner from the bed is a single, unadorned clay pot, a chamber pot. This is your toilet. There's no lid. The sour smell you noticed earlier is coming from here. It will be your responsibility to empty it, carrying it through the brothel and out into the back alley, to be dumped into the same gutters, system that carries away the city's refuse. This simple, degrading chore is a constant reminder of your place. While the rich had rudimentary flushing toilets in their villas, connected to the city's sewer system, you have this. A pot of stale filth. Now for a truly bizarre and little-known detail of your new life, the graffiti. As you run your hands along the damp plaster of the walls, your fingers might catch on shallow grooves. If you had a lamp, you would see that the walls are covered in writing, scratched into the plaster with a nail, a piece of bone, or a sharp stone. This is the ancient equivalent of a bathroom stall wall, and the messages are a strange, heartbreaking mix. This is a well-documented feature of the Pompeian brothel. You'll see names: Felix was here. You'll see crude boasts from clients: I had the best time with Fortunato. You'll see prices scrawled next to names at a key: 16 asses. But amidst the crude male bravado, you might find something else. Something historians still debate the meaning of. You might find a woman's name, written by her own hand. A simple Victoria or Henriette. Was it an act of defiance? A tiny declaration of existence, saying I was here. I am a person, or was it a form of advertising, a way to build a reputation among repeat clients, or perhaps it was something sadder, a way to count the days, or the clients were desperate. Personal record keeping in a world that tried to render you anonymous. Scholars argue back and forth, were these women literate enough to write their own names? Was it a sign of agency, however small, or just another part of the business? To you, tracing the letters in the dark, it feels like a message from a ghost, a fellow prisoner who left her mark on this cold stone before you arrive. You sit down on the edge of the stone bed, the straw rustling beneath you. The finality of it all begins to sink in. This tiny, dark, damp box is your entire universe now. Your life has been stripped down to these 4 walls, a stone slab, and a clay pot. You are physically and socially walled off from the world. A permanent chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. You wrap your arms around yourself, listening to the muffled sounds of the world you're no longer a part of, and you wait. You wait for the latch on the door to click again. Time passes in a blurry, disorienting haze, marked only by the sounds from the corridor. Eventually, a dull thirst begins to gnaw at you. Your throat feels dry and scratchy, and the stagnant, dusty air in your cell only makes it worse. You have no water. Lying on the lumpy straw pallet, you listen, waiting for a chance to venture out. Finally, you hear a lull in the hallway traffic. You slowly, cautiously open your door and peer out. The corridor is empty, lit by that one greasy, flickering lamp. Livia, the older woman, is nowhere in sight. Driven by thirst, you creep out of your cell. You remember seeing a large earthenware jug in the corner of the main waiting room when you first arrived. Surely, that must be the water supply. You make your way back down the corridor and up the few steps into the front room. The smoky haze is thicker now, but the room is empty of clients. The jug is still there, and next to it, a few chipped ceramic cups. You gratefully pick one up, dip it into the jug, and bring the cool liquid to your lips. The water is not right. It's lukewarm and has a flat, slightly metallic taste. It's not the fresh, clean water you've seen flowing from the public fountains in the grand squares. This is the water for the forgotten. This is your first direct lesson in Roman water politics. The city's famous aqueducts delivered millions of gallons of water a day, a fact every history book celebrates. But that water was strictly hierarchical. From sources like the Aqua Marcia was reserved for the emperor, the wealthy elite, and the most important public fountains. Lower quality water from less pristine sources was channeled to the public baths and, eventually, to the commercial and industrial districts. And what did places like this get? The absolute dregs. The Leno isn't going to pay for a private, legal connection to the aqueduct system. That was astronomically expensive. Instead, he gets his water through less official means. Your water might come from a variety of dubious sources. It could be hauled in buckets from the Tiber River itself, the same river that served as the city's main sewer, carrying away all manner of human and industrial waste. Or it might be drawn from a shallow, contaminated well dug in the brothel's own courtyard, or most likely it comes from an illegal tap into one of the main water conduits, siphoning off the lowest grade water that was already intended for flushing the public latrines. So you're essentially drinking toilet water. Then here's a weird, unsanitary little fact of Roman life: the lead pipes. For centuries, historians and scientists have engaged in a fierce debate, famously known as the lead pipe theory, about whether lead poisoning contributed to the decline of the Roman Empire. Did the elite slowly poison themselves by drinking water carried through these pipes and sipping wine from pewter goblets? The mainstream consensus today is that it was probably not a major factor in the fall of the empire. The water flowed so constantly that it had little time to absorb significant amounts of lead, and a natural calcium carbonate deposit often formed on the inside of the pipes, acting as a barrier. But for you, drinking the stagnant, lukewarm water from a jug where it has been sitting for hours or even days, the risk is much higher. You're not getting the fresh, fast-flowing stuff. You're getting the leftovers. The potential for lead contamination is just one of a whole cocktail of invisible threats lurking in your cup. The more immediate danger is biological. This water is teeming with bacteria E. coli, salmonella, and countless other pathogens from the waste-filled river or the contaminated well. Dysentery is rampant in the poorer quarters of Rome. For a respectable citizen with access to good food and a clean bed, a bout of it might be a miserable but survivable experience. For you, in your weakened state, living in a filthy environment, it could easily be a death sentence. Historians still argue about the true public health impact of Rome's water system. Was it a net positive, providing more water to more people than any civilization before it? Or did it create a false sense of security, with much of the population, especially the poor, drinking from demonstrably unsafe sources? The gleaming aqueducts on the horizon are a monument to Roman achievement, but the cup of tepid, tainted water in your hand tells the other story. It's a story of inequality, where the most basic necessity for life was distributed according to status. You take another sip because you have no choice. The taste of metal and mud is the taste of your new reality, You are at the very end of the pipe. You set the cup of questionable water down, the metallic aftertaste lingering on your tongue. But the taste is quickly overwhelmed by the other sensory information flooding your brain, the smells. Now that you've been inside for a while, your nose is starting to dissect the complex bouquet of the lupa, and it's an education in the realities of pre-modern hygiene. The most dominant scent is the one you noticed first, the thick, greasy smoke from the cheap oil lamps. The fuel is low-grade olive oil, the dregs from the pressing, sometimes even rendered animal fat. It fills the air with a constant, sooty haze that stings your eyes and coats the back of your throat. You can feel it settling on your skin, in your hair, on your new coarse dress. You are slowly being coated in a fine layer of grime. Underneath the smoke is the powerful, cloying scent of cheap perfume. Livia, the older woman, seems to douse herself in it. So do the other women you catch glimpses of in the corridor. It's a harsh floral scent, likely made from cheap ingredients like cassia or myrrh, diluted in oil. This isn't the expensive, exotic perfume of a senator's wife. This is a functional smell. It's meant to mask the other, less pleasant odors. It's an olfactory lie, a desperate attempt to cover the stink of reality with a veneer of artificial sweetness. This is a well-known aspect of Roman life. They were obsessed with scents, using them in everything from their baths to their food. But here in the brothel, perfume isn't a luxury. It's a necessity, a tool of the trade. But the perfume is fighting a losing battle. It can't cover the persistent, underlying smell of human sweat. There's no ventilation in this building, no fresh air to clear the rooms between clients. The scent of exertion, of unwashed bodies crammed into a small, airless space, hangs heavy in the atmosphere. It clings to the straw mattresses, the rough woolen blankets, and the very stones of the walls. It's a smell you'll become so used to that you'll barely notice it after a few days, but right now, it's almost suffocating. And then there's the damp. The brothel is built partially underground, and the stone walls are constantly weeping moisture. This creates a pervasive, musty smell of mildew and mold. You can see the dark, fuzzy patches of it growing in the corners of the ceiling and along the bottom of the walls. Breathing this in, day after day, is a slow poison. It's a direct assault on your respiratory system. The bad air, or malaria, as it would one day be called, was something the Romans understood on a gut level. Even if they didn't know about microbes, they knew that swampy, damp places bred sickness. And you are living in a man-made swamp. Here's a small, disgusting fact that you quickly learn. The chamber pots, while you are expected to empty your own, not everyone is so diligent. A spilled pot in the corridor, a careless client, or just the general sloshing of waste creates an underlying sharp, ammoniac tang of stale urine. It's a smell that bites at the back of your nose. Combined with this is the smell from the primitive latrine out back, which is likely little more than a trench or a cesspit. The stench wafts back into the building, a potent reminder of the lack of sanitation. The debate among historians on this topic is subtle but important. To what degree were Romans used to these smells? Some argue that in a world without modern sanitation, the human nose was simply less sensitive to odors we would find repulsive. They contend that the smell of manure, waste, and unwashed bodies was just the background scent of life, and people were largely unbothered by it. Others argue that this is a misconception. They point to the vast Roman perfume industry, the use of incense in homes and temples, and the writings of satirists who constantly complained about the stink of the city, as evidence that Romans were just as sensitive to bad smells as we are. They simply had fewer effective ways to combat them. They didn't love the smell, they were just trapped in it. Living here in this concentrating cauldron of odor, you tend to agree with the second group. This isn't normal. It's an assault. The final layer of the brothel's scentscape is the most intimate and, in some ways, the most distressing. It's the smell of sickness, the faint, metallic scent of blood, the sour smell of infected sores, the foul breath of someone with rotting teeth or a gut infection. These are the quiet, personal smells that the loud perfume tries and fails to conceal. They are the smells of decay, of bodies breaking down under the strain of this life. You realize that the scent of the lupanar is not just the smell of a dirty building. It is the smell of poverty, of exploitation, and of profound, systemic neglect. It's the smell of despair, and it gets into everything. It's a smell you know you'll carry with you, long after you leave these walls, if you ever do. The coarse, brightly colored dress you were given feels alien against your skin. It's not just uncomfortable, it's a costume, a uniform that broadcasts your status to the world. You smooth it down, the rough fabric scratching your hands. It's a simple, sleeveless tunic, but the color, a gaudy saffron yellow or a loud, cheap purple, is designed to be unmistakable. In the moral landscape of Rome, colors carried meaning. Respectable married women. The matronae wore the pure white of the stole-laid women. Your dress is the color of shame. This brings us to one of the most persistent images associated with Roman prostitutes, the idea that they were eagerly required to wear a toga. This is a classic mainstream history point, repeated in countless books and documentaries. The toga was the quintessential garment of the Roman male citizen. For a woman to wear it was a sign of disgrace, a public inversion of the natural order. It was meant to be a mark of infamy, stripping her of femininity and aligning her with the lowest classes of men. The poet Juvenal and the writer Martial both mock women into gas, using it as a shorthand for moral depravity. But as you look around at the other women in the brothel, Livia in her faded green tunic, a young Gallic girl in a garish red, you don't see a single toga. This is where history gets complicated and fun. The prostitute's toga. The toga muli ebr is a subject of intense academic debate. While the literary sources are clear, the archaeological and social evidence is almost non-existent. Was this a real, enforced law, or was it a literary exaggeration? A convenient symbol used by satirists to make a point about immorality? Many modern historians now argue for the latter. They suggest that forcing thousands of prostitutes to wear a cumbersome, expensive, and quintessentially male garment was simply impractical. The toga was a huge, unwieldy piece of wool that required skill to drape correctly. It was completely unsuitable for the kind of life you lead. The reality was likely much simpler and more practical. You were art not by a specific garment, but by the cheapness, gaudiness, and often the deliberate forensics of your clothing. Your saffron-colored tunic does the job just as well as a toga, signaling your profession to any potential client in a crowded, dimly lit tavern. The toga was a symbol for the poets. The cheap, bright dress is your reality. And what about what's underneath? Nothing. Undergarments as we know them didn't really exist. A Roman woman might wear a simple linen wrap around her chest, a strap high amorphosia, especially if she were athletic, but was an unnecessary layer. You have the one dress, and that's it. This lack of underlayers means the coarse, dyed wool or linen of your tunic is in direct contact with your skin, all day, every day. It chafes. When you sweat, the cheap dyes might run, staining your skin. And you will never, ever feel fully clean while wearing it. Here's a small, sad detail about your wardrobe: you don't get a change of clothes. This one dress is yours. It will be worn day in and day out, absorbing the smoke, the dirt, and the smells of your life. When it gets too filthy, you might get a chance to wash it, dunking it in a bucket of that same questionable water and scrubbing it with harsh, lye-based soap, but it will never be truly clean. The fabric will grow thinner, the colors will fade, and the threads will start to fray. Your dress will age with you, its decaying tearing your own. The lack of proper clothing has another, more serious consequence: the cold. Roman nights, especially in winter, can be surprisingly cold, and this stone building offers little insulation. With only a thin tunic and a single rough woolen blanket for your stone bed, you are constantly chilled. This chronic exposure to cold lowers your immune system, making you more susceptible to the coughs, fevers, and respiratory infections that are rampant in these crowded, damp conditions. A respectable person has multiple layers of fine wool to ward off the chill. You have this one pathetic piece of cloth. Your wardrobe isn't just a symbol of your shame, it's an active threat to your health. So while the historians debate the finer points of the toga muli ebr, you stand there, tugging at the uncomfortable fabric of your dress. It's a physical manifestation of your legal and social status. It isolates you, marks you, and even sickens you. It's a cage made of cloth. As another client is lead down the hall, his eyes catch the bright color of your dress in the lamplight. He knows exactly what you are, without a word being spoken. The wardrobe of shame has done its job. Now that you're dressed for the part, you might wonder what else you're allowed to possess in this new life. You look around your tiny bare cell. The stone ledge for a bed, the straw pallet, the chamber pot. That's it. The brothel keeper, the Leno, has stripped your life down to the absolute essentials of the trade. Personal possessions are a liability. They take up space, they can be stolen, and most importantly, they represent a connection to a past life we want you to forget. You are, however, allowed a few meager items. Livia, the elder woman, eventually comes to your cell and deposits a small, rough spun cloth bag on your bed. Inside are the tools of your trade. You empty it out. The first object is a small, cheap oil lamp, no bigger than your palm. It's made of reddish-brown terracotta, with a hole for the oil and a nozzle for the wick. It comes with a tiny flask of the same low-grade, smoky oil used in the hallways. This lamp is a luxury, of a sort. It means you won't have to spend all your non-working hours in absolute darkness. You can have a small, flickering flame to stare at. But it's also a tool of control. The Leno rations the oil. When you're out, you're out. The light is on his terms. Next is a small wooden comb. It's a dual-sided comb, a design that was very common in the Roman world. One side has thick, widely spaced teeth for detangling, and the other has fine, tightly packed teeth. This isn't for style, is a very specific, and very important, purpose removing lice and their eggs or nits. The fact that this is considered an essential item tells you everything you need to know about the sanitation of your new environment. This will be a constant, daily battle. This is a solid, mainstream historical fact. These fine-toothed combs are one of the most common archaeological finds in Roman domestic sites, a silent testament to a very itchy reality. Then you find a small pot of something greasy and white. You sniff it. It has a faint, sharp scent. This is your makeup. It's not the expensive, imported cosmetics of a wealthy matronne. She might use powders made from ground pearls or imported Chinese silk. Your pot contains a cheap, lead-based pigment called cerussure. It's a white foundation, meant to be smeared on your face to create a pale complexion, which was considered fashionable. It also hides blemishes, rashes, and the powder of sickness. The irony is brutal. This lead-based makeup, which you are expected to wear to look more attractive and healthy, is a slow-acting poison. It's absorbed through your skin, and over time, it can cause severe neurological damage, infertility, and a host of other health problems. You are literally poisoning yourself to appear healthy. Herein lies a curious and somewhat disgusting little-known tidbit of Roman cosmetics. To make the white lead painted here better to the skin and give it a smooth texture, what was the preferred mixing agent? Crocodile dung. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist, writes about this with surprising frankness. Wealthy women would have had their cerussure mixed with fine creams and oils. Your pot is likely mixed with something much cheaper, animal fat, or if the Leno is especially cheap, spit. The idea of smearing crocodile feces on your face for beauty is bizarre enough, but it highlights the extreme lengths to which people went and the strange materials they used. The final item in your bag is a small, worn leather pouch. It's empty. This is your purse, your marsupium. This is where you will keep the coins you earn. But you know from the moment you see it that it will never be full. The Leno will take the vast majority of your earnings. You are working to pay off a debt that will likely never be fully paid. The price he paid for you, the cost of your food, your lodging in this miserable cell. The few coins you are allowed to keep are for what, exactly? This is another point of historical debate. What could a woman in your position possibly buy? Some historians argue this small allowance was a psychological tool, creating the illusion of agency and encouraging you to work harder. Others suggest it was for tiny, essential purchases. The Leno wouldn't provide a bit of extra food from a street vendor, a ribbon for your hair, or perhaps, most importantly, an offering to a sympathetic goddess like Venus or Isis, a desperate prayer for protection or escape. You gather your new possessions. A lamp that offers fleeting light, a comb for a war you can't win, a pot of poison to paint on your face, and an empty purse. These are the sum total of your worldly goods. They are not items of comfort or joy. They are instruments of your profession, each one a reminder of your complete and utter dependency on the man who owns you. They are tools designed to maintain the commodity your body just enough for it to remain profitable. You put them back in the bag and tuck it under your straw pallet. It doesn't feel like much, but it's all you have. Days bleed into nights, a monotonous cycle of waiting in your cell in the brief, grim encounters of your trade. The grime feels permanent now, a second skin you can't scrub off. You ache for the simple feeling of being clean, for the sensation of hot water sluicing away the dirt and sweat. You think of the great public baths of Rome, the thermae. They are one of the city's proudest achievements. Huge, magnificent complexes, not just for bathing, but for socializing, exercising, and relaxing. Places like the baths of Caracalla or Trajan were like opulent public palaces with libraries, gardens, art galleries, and of course, a series of pools: the frigidarium cold bath, the tepidarium warm bath, and the coldarium hot bath. The thought of immersing yourself in a steaming hot pool, of scraping the filth from your skin with a strigil, is an almost painful fantasy. Surely you think you can go there. The baths were for everyone, a cornerstone of Roman urban life, open to rich and poor alike for a very small entrance fee, sometimes even free. This is the common historical narrative: the baths as a great social equalizer. So one afternoon during a lull, you entertained the idea. You could sneak out. The entrance fee is only a quadriennis, the smallest Roman coin. You might even have one look in your eyes, quickly crushes the notion with a harsh laugh. The baths, she scoffs, for us, don't be a fool. She explains the cruel reality. While the baths were technically open to almost everyone, they were also intensely social and moralized spaces. A respectable woman would never go alone. She would be accompanied by her slaves. The bathing times were also often segregated. Women typically had their own, smaller bath complexes or were restricted to bathing in the morning hours, while the men, whose workday ended in the early afternoon, would flood the baths from lunchtime until dusk. Alone in your garish dress, during the women's hours, would be to invite scorn, insults, and immediate expulsion by the bath attendants. You are infamia, you are filth. You are precisely what the respectable citizens are there to wash away. And going during the men's hours? That's a different kind of danger. It would be seen as a blatant solicitation, an act of business, and would attract the worst kind of attention. The thermae were a place for citizens at leisure, not for working women of the night. Your presence would pollute their clean, ordered world. This is where the historical picture gets more nuanced. While you, as a brothel prostitute, are barred, there was a whole class of women who did operate in and around the baths. These were often independent operators, women who would offer their services in the darker corners and private rooms that were sometimes attached to the larger bath complexes. This leads to a rather bizarre and little-known feature of some Roman baths. They were sometimes suspected of being fronts for prostitution. Archaeologists have found small, cell-like rooms in the basements of some bathhouses that look suspiciously like the rooms in your lupanar. This has led to an ongoing debate: were these just storage rooms or changing stalls, as some claim? Or were they clandestine service rooms, allowing men to conveniently combine their bathing and their recreation under one roof? A line between a public service and a private vice was often blurry. So how do you get clean? The answer is as grim and unsanitary as everything else in your life. The Leno is not going to waste fuel heating water for you. There is no bath in the brothel. Your bath consists of a wooden bucket, filled with the same cold, tainted water from the jug in the front room. You get a coarse rag. That's it. You can perform a quick, shivering sponge bath in the confines of your cell, the dirty water trickling onto the stone floor where it will mix with the general dampness and filth. You will never feel truly clean. The cold water doesn't open your pores or dissolve the grease and grime. The soap, if you're given any, is a harsh lye-based substance that irritates your skin far more than it cleans it. You can scrub and scrub, but you can't wash away the smoky film from the lamps, the lead from your makeup, or the general residue of your existence. This lack of proper bathing is more than just a discomfort. It's a direct cause of skin problems. Rashes, boils, and fungal infections thrive on unwashed skin. Small cuts or scrapes, which would be trivial for a clean person, can easily become infected in this environment. Your inability to visit the public baths is a powerful symbol of your exclusion. The baths were the heart of the Roman community. They were where news was exchanged, business deals were made, and friendships were forged. To be barred from the warm, steaming, communal heart of the city, relegated to a cold bucket of dirty water in a dark room. The grand thermist, and as a monument to a civilization you can see and smell, but can never, ever join. Life settles into a grim rhythm, punctuated by the small, constant miseries of the flesh. But there is another rhythm, a monthly one, that brings with it a unique set of challenges and anxieties. When your menstruation begins, there are no drugstores, no tampons, no adhesive pads. There is only a stark, biological reality to be managed with the most primitive of means. In the clean, orderly world of a Roman matronne, this was a private, almost ritualized time. She would have access to clean linen cloths, slaves to help her, and the privacy of her own chambers. For you, it's a logistical nightmare and a source of profound shame and fear. Your first clue that your period is coming might be the Leno's suspicious glare. He keeps track. He has to. A menstruating woman is a woman who cannot work. Every day you are unavailable is a loss of income for him. His irritation is a palpable thing, another layer of pressure in your already suffocating world. When you confirm that you are bleeding, you are confined to your cell. You are, for a few days, useless to him. So how do you manage the flow of blood? The historical record on this is surprisingly quiet, as it was considered a taboo subject, something that respectable male authors would not deign to write about in detail. But from medical texts, archaeological finds, and a bit of logical inference, we can piece together a picture. The most common method, and the one available to you, is simple rags. You might be given a few strips of old, worn-out linen or wool scraps from a tunic that has become too tattered to mend, or a piece of an old blanket. These are your pads. There are no pins, no belts, no adhesive. You have to fold the cloth into a thick pad and simply hold it in place between your legs. It's awkward, uncomfortable, and not very effective. You can't move around much without it shifting. This is why you are confined to your cell, spending most of your time lying on the lumpy, straw-filled pallet. The blood soaks through the rags quickly, and they become damp and cold against your skin. The risk of chafing and skin irritation is immense. And here we come to a rather strange and little-known piece of Roman belief surrounding menstruation. Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, provides a laundry list of the supposed supernatural powers of a menstruating woman. He claims that if you walk naked through a field, caterpillars and other pests will fall from the plants. He says that your touch can tarnish mirrors, dull the edge of a knife, and cause bees to abandon their hive. He even asserts that a dog that tastes menstrual blood will go mad. This wasn't just folklore, it was presented as scientific fact. While you are probably not parading naked through any fields, this powerful cultural belief in the polluting nature of your state reinforces your isolation. You are not just physically unclean in the eyes of Roman superstition, you are magically toxic. The most pressing problem is cleaning these cloths. Once a rag is soiled, what do you do with it? You have to wash it yourself, in the same bucket of cold, dirty water you use for your own body. You take the bloody rags to the back alley, trying to be discreet, and rinse them as best you can in the frigid, contaminated water. The blood never fully comes out. The rags are left with a permanent brownish stain and a faint, metallic smell. You then have to find a place to dry them. There is no private cloth sign. You might hang them in a corner of your dark cell, where they will take days to dry in the damp, stagnant air, contributing to the musty smell. Or you might discreetly lay them on a roof or a wall in the back alley, where they are a public testament to your condition. This whole process is not just a hassle, it's a serious health risk. Using and reusing inadequately washed cloths is a direct route to infection. The damp fabric is a perfect breeding ground for bacteria. Urinary tract infections, vaginal infections, and even more serious conditions like toxic shock syndrome, though they wouldn't have had a name for it, were a constant threat. Historians are still debating the extent to which ancient women understood the connection between menstrual hygiene and infection. Did they associate the foul smell of prudy washed rags with sickness, or did they just accept it as part of the misery? The medical texts of physicians like Galen show an understanding of gynecology, but it's highly unlikely that this knowledge ever trickled down to the level of a brothel. Your health is in your own uneducated hands. For these few days, you are left alone in the dark. It's a strange sort of reprieve, but one filled with discomfort and anxiety. You lie on your pallet, the damp rags a constant, unpleasant reminder of your body's functions. You listen to the sounds of the brothel continuing without you, the business of the night carrying on. The Leno's anger simmers. The other women might see you as lucky to get a rest, or as a burden. It's a lonely, isolating experience. A monthly cycle of filth and fear that is an invisible, unwritten part of your story. The fear of menstruation is a monthly burden, but it's overshadowed by a much larger, more constant terror, the fear of pregnancy. For a respectable Roman wife, pregnancy was her primary duty, a cause for celebration. For you, it is the ultimate disaster. A pregnancy would render you unable to work for months, making you a useless drain on the Leno's resources. His reaction would be swift and brutal. At best, you might be threatened not to think about that. Your survival depends on not conceiving a child. So you must turn to the world of ancient contraception. It's a desperate, frightening landscape of folklore, you say, and genuinely dangerous medical advice. Your knowledge comes from the whispers of the other women in the brothel, Livia, the Gallic girl, others who have been here longer. They share their secrets in hushed tones, a grim sorority of shared risk. The first line of defense is primitive barrier methods. The most common concept, though its actual use is debated, was a form of pessary. This involved taking a wool, lint, or soft linen, soaking it in some kind of substance believed to have contraceptive properties, and inserting it into the vagina before intercourse. This is a well-documented practice from ancient medical texts, like the Soranus of Ephesus Gynecology. The idea was to create a physical blockage and, hopefully, a spermicide environment. What were these substances? Here's where it gets truly strange and often hazardous. Some were relatively benign, if ineffective honey, which is slightly acidic cedar gum or other sticky resins, or olive oil, which might hinder sperm motility. But many were far more dangerous. You might hear a whisper to use a paste made from acacia gum and dates, a method also mentioned in ancient Egyptian papyri. You might be told to use a pessary soaked in a solution of alum, a powerful astringent, or even something as caustic as lead carbonate, the same poison you're using as makeup. The idea of inserting lead into your body is horrifying, but in a state of desperation, you might consider it. And then there are the magical solutions. This is where the line between medicine and superstition blurs completely. A particularly strange and little-known piece of contraceptive folklore, mentioned by the medical writer Aetius of Amida, involves the testicle of a weasel. Wrap it in a piece of mule skin and tie it to your thigh as an amulet. It seems absurd, a joke, but in a world without scientific understanding, where gods and spirits were believed to influence every aspect of life, who are you to say it doesn't work? Desperation makes you willing to try almost anything. The effectiveness of any of these methods was, of course, extremely low. This leads to the next, more dangerous stage: abortifacients. If you miss your period, panic sets in. The other women will share their knowledge of herbs and substances believed to induce a miscarriage. This is the dark side of Roman herbal medicine. You might be told to drink a bitter tea made from penurial, a mint-like herb that is, in fact, highly toxic to the liver in large doses. The most famous and sought after abortifacient in the ancient world was a plant called silphium. Silphium was a plant that grew only in a small region of North Africa, near the Greek colony of Cyrene. It was so valuable for its culinary and medicinal properties, including its use as a powerful contraceptive and abortifacient, that it was harvested to extinction. The plant was central to Cyrene's economy that its image was stamped on their coins. By your time in Imperial Rome, true silphium is incredibly rare and impossibly expensive, a thing of legend. You might get some other, less effective plant passed off as the real thing by a back alley herb seller. This extinction by demand of an ancient contraceptive is a fascinating, true story of the ancient world. The debate among historians rages on how effective were these ancient contraceptives and abortifacients really. Some scholars, looking at the high birth rates and large families of the era, argue they were mostly useless folklore. They believe that population control was managed more through the grim reality of infant exposure, abandoning unwanted newborns, than through preventing conception. Others argue that we underestimate ancient knowledge. They point to the chemical properties of plants, like penuril, and the detailed recipes in medical texts as evidence that at least some of these methods, while dangerous, may have had some degree of success. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, a handful of effective but dangerous methods, hidden in a sea of useless and superstitious practices. For you, this isn't an academic debate. It's a life-or-death gamble. Every month is a game of Russian roulette. You place your faith in a wad of honey-soaked wool, a bitter herbal tea, or a foul-smelling amulet, praying it will be enough to keep you safe. The constant, low-grade stress erodes your health almost as much as the physical dangers. The fear of a missed period is the background music to your entire existence. The threats to your health are not just internal and microscopic. They are crawling, jumping, and biting. Your tiny, windowless cell, with its straw-filled mattress and general lack of cleanliness, is a paradise for pests. The most constant and irritating of these are lice and fleas. They are an inescapable part of your daily life, a torment that makes sleep difficult and waking hours a misery of constant itching. You feel the first telltale itch on your scalp. You try to ignore it, but it returns persistent and sharp. Soon it's not just one itch, but dozens. You take out the fine-toothed wooden comb you were given, the one designed specifically for this purpose, and begin the ritual. You sit on the edge of your stone bed and methodically drag the comb through your hair from scalp to end. With each pass, you inspect the teeth, and there they are. Tiny, greyish insects clinging to the wood. You crush them between your thumbnails with a grim satisfaction. This is the louse, your most intimate and unwelcome companion. This is a universal problem in the ancient world, a fact confirmed by overwhelming archaeological evidence. Those fine-toothed knit combs are found everywhere, from Roman forts on the frontiers of Britain to the villas of Pompeii. Even the mummified remains of wealthy Egyptians have been found with lice in their hair. It was a great equalizer of sorts, but like all things, the poor suffered more. A wealthy matronne had slaves who would spend hours combing her hair, using special herbal rinses made with vinegar or infusions of larkspur, which were believed to repel the insects. You have only your own two hands and your simple wooden comb. The battle is endless. You can spend an hour cleaning your hair, only to be infested by leaning against a wall, using a shared blanket, or simply from the lice that live in your straw mattress. The straw pallet is a particular nightmare. It's a perfect breeding ground, a warm, sheltered environment for lice, fleas, and their eggs. You can't replace it until the leno decides it has rotted through. So you sleep every night in the enemy's nest. Then there are the fleas. While lice live on your body, fleas are masters of the ambush. They live in the cracks in the floor, the straw of the mattress, the folds of your woolen blanket. They jump onto you to feed, leaving behind angry, red whelps that itch with an intensity that can drive you mad. You wake up in the morning with new bites on your ankles, your waist, anywhere your skin was exposed. The itching is relentless. You scratch in your sleep, breaking the skin with your fingernails. Open sores are then prime locations for infection, a direct gateway for the bacteria that thrive in the filth of your cell. Here we encounter a truly disgusting but historically fascinating little de-catcher. In the later medieval and Renaissance periods, wealthy ladies would sometimes wear a small fur stole, often the pelt of a marten or a weasel, around their necks. The common belief is that this was a fashion accessory, but some historians have a more parasitic theory. The idea is that the fleas would be attracted to the warmer body temperature of the small animal pelt, preferring it to the human skin, thus catching the fleas. While this is more associated with later periods, the principle highlights the desperation to find any solution. In your Roman world, there is no such luxury. You are the flea catcher. The academic debate here revolves around the ancient understanding of disease transmission. Did the Romans know that fleas and lice could carry diseases? The answer certainly no. They understood the connection between swamps and bad air causing fevers, but the concept of insect vectors was centuries away. They saw fleas and lice as a nuisance, a torment, a sign of filth, but not as the potential carriers of deadly pestilence. The devastating plague of Justinian in the 6th century AD, which was carried by the fleas of infected rats, was still in the future. But other, less dramatic diseases were likely transmitted this way. Trench fever, relapsing fever, and various forms of typhus are all carried by lice. A sudden unexplained fever that sweeps through the brothel could very well have been spread by these tiny insects. The historians argue about which specific diseases were present, but the mechanism of transmission was there, crawling in your hair and hiding in your bed. The constant itching does more than just threaten your physical health. It erodes your mental state. It's a form of low-grade, perpetual torture. It frays your nerves, makes it impossible to relax, and adds another layer of misery to an already unbearable existence. You find yourself scratching constantly, a nervous, reflexive habit. You see the other women doing it too. It's a shared language of discomfort. At night, you lie on your rustling pallet, trying to find a position where the straw doesn't poke you, feeling the phantom crawling sensations on your skin even when nothing is there. Sleep, the only escape you have, becomes a battlefield, and it's a battle you lose more often than you win. The itching from lice and fleas is a constant torment, but it's the least of your skin-related worries. Your skin, the largest organ of your body, is under sustained assault from all sides. The lack of proper washing, the chafing of your coarse tunic, the lead-based makeup, and the generally filthy environment create a perfect storm for a host of dermatological nightmares. You look at your hands, your arm map of your suffering. The most common affliction is a simple but persistent rash. It could be contact dermatitis from the cheap, irritating dyes in your dress, or a fungal infection like ringworm, thriving in the damp, unventilated conditions. It starts as a red, itchy patch and can spread, becoming flaky, scaly, and painful. You see similar rashes on the other women. Livia has a permanent, angry red patch on her neck where her collar rubs. There are no antifungal creams, no hydrokeratisin. The best you can do is try to keep it dry, which is almost impossible in your damp cell, or maybe apply a poultice of crushed herbs if another woman knows a folk remedy. Most of the time, you just have to endure it. Then there are the sores. A small scratch from a fingernail while itching a flea bite, a scrape against a rough stone wall. These minor injuries don't heal properly here. Instead of scabbing over and fading, they fester. The ubiquitous bacteria of your environment, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, invade the broken skin. The small cut becomes a swollen, pus-filled boil, or a weeping sore with a yellowish crust. These are classic signs of impetigo or cellulite. They are painful to the touch and can leave deep, pitted scars if they eventually heal. The Leno looks at these sores with disgust, not out of concern for your health, but because they are blemishes on the merchandise. He might give you a rag soaked in sour wine vinegar to clean it, an ancient and mildly effective antiseptic, but that's the extent of the medical care you'll receive. This brings us to a particularly nasty and well-known affliction of the ancient world, scabies. This isn't a bacterium or a fungus, it's a mite. A microscopic arachnid that burrows under the top layer of your skin to lay its eggs. The result is an intensely itchy rash, often in the webs of your fingers, on your wrists, or other warm parts of your body. It is wildly contagious, spreading easily through skin-to-skin contact or shared bedding. In the close, cramped quarters of the lupanar, an outbreak of scabies would be almost impossible to contain. It would sweep through the establishment like wildfire. The Romans didn't know about mites, of course. They described the condition, the itch, and prescribed various treatments, most of which were grimly fascinating. One of the most bizarre and little-known treatments for skin diseases comes from the Roman physician Celsus. For certain types of persistent sores or pustules, he recommends a treatment involving the application of Spanish fly and THA rides. This is a powder made from the crushed bodies of a specific type of blister beetle. It's a powerful VSI, meaning it causes the skin to blister severely. The theory was that this induced blistering would draw out the bad humors or pus from the underlying infection. So the cure was to create a massive, painful chemical burn on top of your already infected skin. It's a perfect example of ancient medical logic, where fighting fire with more, and much bigger, fire seemed like a good idea. It's unlikely you to get such a specific and advanced treatment, but it illustrates the often brutal nature of ancient dermatology. The historical debate here centers on diagnosis. When Roman texts describe leprae, are they talking about true leprosy, Hansen's disease? Or is it a catch-all term for a variety of severe skin conditions, like psoriasis, eczema, or fungal infections? True leprosy was probably quite rare in Italy during the height of the empire, though it did exist. However, the social stigma associated with any chronic, disfiguring skin disease was immense. A person with a severe, visible skin condition was often seen as cursed by the gods, morally corrupt, or physically polluted. For you, this academic distinction is meaningless. Whatever the name of your affliction, the result is the same. A visible skin disease makes you less desirable to clients, which angers the learner. It can be painful, debilitating, and socially isolating, even within the already isolated world of the brothel. You try to hide the scaly patch on your arm under a fold of your tunic. You use the thick, lead-based makeup to cover the sores on your face, knowing full well that the cure is also a poison. Your skin becomes a battleground, a visible testament to the invisible war being waged against your body by the filth, the parasites, and the general neglect of your life. Every new spot, every persistent itch, is a sign that you are losing that war. While the skin infections are a visible and painful misery, there is another, deeper fear that haunts the nights, and the lupanar are it's the fear of the sicknesses that are passed not through a casual touch or a shared blanket, but through the very act that defines your existence. You have no name for these diseases. The terms venereal disease or sexually transmitted infection are far in the future. In your world, it is simply the sickness of the groin, a dreaded and poorly understood consequence of the trade. You hear the stories whispered between the other women. A girl who developed painful sores that wouldn't heal. A man who complained of a burning sensation when he urinated and never came back. Livia, with her world-weary eyes, will tell you that it's a risk everyone runs. She'll offer you folk remedies, dosing with sour wine after a client, or chewing on a specific bitter herb, but you both know these are shots in the dark. The mainstream historical view on this topic has undergone a major shift. For a long time, it was widely believed that syphilis, one of the most devastating STIs, was a New World disease brought back to Europe by Columbus's sailors in the 1492. The narrative was that the ancient world was largely free of the major venereal diseases we know today. However, this neat story has been challenged. This is where the real academic controversy lies. Did the Romans have syphilis, or gonorrhea, or herpes? The evidence is highly ambiguous and fiercely debated. Skeletal evidence is key. Archaeologists have found ancient bones, from Britain to Pompeii, that show pitting undeformities consistent with late-stage syphilis, tertiary syphilis. But critics argue these bone lesions could also be caused by other diseases, like yours, are related by non-venereal bacterial infection, or even certain types of cancer. The smoking gun is elusive. Then there are the textual sources. Roman medical writers like Celsus and Galen described various afflictions of the genitals. They write about genital ulcers, fistulas, and discharges. Celsus gives a graphic description of a condition that sounds very much like genital herpes, describing painful, weeping sores that would recur in the same place. He also describes treatments for a condition that involves a discharge from the urethra, which some historians interpret as a clear reference to gonorrhea. The treatments are, as you can imagine, unpleasant. They involved injecting astringent lotions made of things like copper sulfate into the urethra with a primitive metal syringe. The pain must have been excruciating. So, while we can't say with 100% certainty that the Romans had the exact same strains of these diseases as we do today, it's almost certain they dealt with a range of sexually transmitted infections that caused very similar symptoms: painful urination, debilitating sores, chronic discharge, and infertility. And here we find a particularly strange and sad little detail related to this. One of the conditions described by Roman doctors is the ficus or fig. This was a term for genital warts, caused by the human papillomavirus HPV. They were called figs because of their lumpy, fleshy appearance. The treatments for these were brutal. The most common method was ligation, tying a thread or a horsehair tightly around the base of the wart to cut off its blood supply, causing it to wither and fall off. If that didn't work, the next step was cauterization, burning them off with a red-hot iron or a caustic chemical. For a woman in your position, developing these would be a terrifying discovery, leading to a cure that was a form of torture. You live in a state of constant, low-grade medical vigilance. After every client, you perform a frantic self-examination. You look for any sign of a rash, a blister, a sore. You pay close attention to every new ache or pain. Is that twinge in your lower abdomen just a cramp, or is it the beginning of a deeper sickness, what we would now call pelvic inflammatory disease (PID), a common consequence of untreated chlamydia or gonorrhea? This condition could lead to chronic pain, ectopic pregnancies, and permanent sterility. You see the long-term effects on the older women. Livia walks with a slight limp and often complains of a deep, aching pain in her bones. Is it just age in the damp, or is it the result of a long-ago infection that has settled into her joints? You see the scars on another woman's skin, a permanent reminder of about a sore she survived years ago. These diseases, even if not immediately fatal, left their mark. They were a part of the slow grinding process that wore down a woman's body in the brothel. The immediate physical act of your job was one thing, but it's the invisible invaders, the sicknesses without a name, that represent the most profound and terrifying violation of all. The assaults on your body are relentless from your skin to your scalp. But there is one area of hygiene that is often overlooked, yet causes a unique and agonizing kind of misery: your mouth. In an age before modern dentistry, dental health was a constant struggle for everyone. But for you, in your circumstances, it's a battle you are destined to lose. The first thing you notice is the grime. The Roman diet, even for the poor, was coarse and abrasive. Your food, stale bread, rough grains, unwashed vegetables, leaves a gritty film on your teeth. You can feel it with your tongue, a constant reminder of your last meager meal. A wealthy Roman might have a slave dedicated to cleaning their teeth, using a frayed stick dentist scalp and a variety of powders. You have your finger in some water. You might rub your teeth with a rough cloth, or even chew on a twig to try and scrape away the plaque, but it's a losing fight. The mainstream knowledge here is that the Romans, surprisingly, had fewer cavities than we do today. This is largely because their diet was incredibly low in processed sugar. Sugar, as we know it, didn't exist. Their main sweetener was honey, which was used sparingly. So, widespread decay from sugar wasn't the primary problem. The main issues were something else entirely extreme, where gum disease and abscesses. The coarse, gritty diet acted like sandpaper, slowly grinding down the enamel on the surface of your teeth. Archaeological evidence from Roman skeletons consistently shows teeth that have been worn flat, sometimes right down to the pulp. As the enamel wears away, the sensitive dentin underneath is exposed, leading to sharp, shooting pains whenever you eat something hard or drink something cold. This is where you learn a strange and frankly disgusting little fact about Roman dental hygiene. The most popular ingredient for toothpaste and mouthwash among those who could afford it: urine. Specifically aged Portuguese urine. The Roman poet Catullus famously mocked a rival, Aeginetius, for his gleaming white smile, sneering that he achieved it by washing his teeth with his own pee. It sounds vile, but there was a chemical logic to it. The ammonia in urine is a powerful cleaning agent, which is why the fullers used it for laundry. It could cut through grime and whiten teeth. The most potent, and therefore most expensive, urine was believed to come from Portugal. It was imported in amphorae and sold as a luxury cosmetic item. You, of course, have no access to this exotic mouthwash. You have only the brackish water from the jug. Your real enemy is what's happening at the gum line. The build-up of plaque and tartar, which you have no effective way to remove, hardens into a solid mass. This irritates your gums, causing them to become swollen, red, and prone to bleeding. This is gingivitis. You notice a metallic, coppery taste of blood in your mouth in the mornings. Over time, this condition worsens into periodontitis. The gums begin to recede from the teeth, creating pockets where food particles and bacteria can become trapped. The infection goes deeper, attacking the ligaments on bone that hold your teeth in place. Your teeth start to feel loose. And then comes the inevitable, agonizing climax, the abscess. An infection gets trapped deep in the root of a tooth, and the pressure begins to build, throbbing ache that you try to ignore. But it grows, day by day, into a relentless, searing pain that dominates your entire consciousness. The side of your face swells up. You can't eat. You can't eat. You can't sleep. The pain is so all-consuming that it's impossible to work, which brings the Leno's wrath down upon you. What can be done? Roman dentistry was a brutal affair. There were specialists dentistae, but they were more like blacksmiths than doctors. Their primary solution for a toothache was extraction. There was no effective anesthetic. The procedure involved the dentist holding your head steady, while he used a variety of terrifying-looking iron forceps to grip the offending tooth and drench it from your jaw. The risk of the tooth shattering, of jaw fracture, or of a subsequent infection was enormous. Of course, this service cost money you don't have. The historical debate here revolves around the sophistication of Roman dentistry. Some historians point to examples of surprisingly advanced dental work, prosthetics made of gold, wire holding carved bone or ivory teeth in place as evidence of a highly skilled profession. But others argue that these examples are exceedingly rare, belonging only to the super rich. For the vast majority of the population, and especially for someone like you, dental care was non-existent. You were far more likely to see a barber or a back alley tooth puller at a market stall than a trained dentist, so you are left to suffer. You might press a clove against the gum if you can get one, as its oil has a mild numbing effect. You might rinse your mouth with salt water, but mostly you just endure the agony until, hopefully, the abscess bursts, releasing a foul-tasting wave of pus and blood into your mouth, providing a temporary, blessed relief. The tooth, now dead, would eventually fall out on its own. You look at the older women in the brothel and you see the future gaps in their smiles, sunken cheeks, and the constant, low-grade pain of a mouth in ruins. Your smile, once an asset, is becoming another source of shame and pain. In this world of constant physical decay and discomfort, there is one presence more menacing than any disease or parasite, the Leno. He is the brothel keeper, but he is more than just your boss. He is your owner, your jailer, and the absolute arbiter of your life. His moods dictate the atmosphere of the lupanar are more than the weather or the time of day. When he is pleased, there is a tense quiet. When he is angry, a palpable fear ripples through the corridors. The Leno, or the female version, the Lena, was a figure of universal contempt in Roman society. In the rigid social hierarchy, they occupied the absolute lowest rung, alongside gravidogs and executioners. They were seen as profiting from vice, as human traffickers who bought and sold despair. The playwright Plautus, in his comedies, almost always portrays the Leno as a greedy, treacherous, and cowardly villain. This is the mainstream historical image, a one-dimensional scumbag. But for you, he is not a comedic villain. He is a complex and terrifying reality. He is your banker, your landlord, your employer, and your warden, all rolled into one. He bought you either from a slave market, from your impoverished family, or from another pimp. You now owe him a debt. This debt is the chain that binds you to him. It includes the price he paid for you, plus the cost of your upkeep, the miserable cell, the meager food, the single-course dress. He keeps a ledger, a slate tablet board where he meticulously records your earnings and your expenses. The math, you quickly learn, is always in his favor. The debt is designed to be unpayable. His control is absolute. He dictates when you wake, when you eat, and when you sleep. He determines which clients you see. He can sell you to another Leno at any time, without a moment's notice. You could be in Rome one day and on a ship to a grim provincial brothel in Egypt or Gaul the next. You are a movable asset, a piece on his chessboard. This is where you encounter a particularly weird and disturbing legal aspect of your relationship. Under Roman law, as a person under his authority, whether as his slave or as a free person who has signed a contract of service, he has the right to physically discipline you. This is a chillingly broad power. The law was, as always, on the side of the property owner. If a client were to harm you, you could not sue him. But your Leno could. He could sue the client for damages to his property. Your physical well-being is protected only insofar as it affects your profitability. Your pain is irrelevant, his financial loss is a legal matter. The academic debate surrounding the Leno centers on this question. Were most of them independent operators, or were they part of larger, organized crime syndicates? The literary sources often portray them as solitary predators, running their single grimy establishment. But some historians argue that this is a naive view. They point to the logistics of the slave trade, the need for enforcers, and the connections required to operate without being constantly harassed by the local magistrate. They suggest that many Len ones were likely small cogs in a much larger machine of organized exploitation, with powerful unseen patrons protecting them in exchange for a cut of the profits. Was your Leno a small-time monster, or the public face of a much larger, more sophisticated evil? You'll never know. You only know the man in front of you. His power is not just physical and financial, it's psychological. He fosters an environment of suspicion and competition among the women. He might show favor to one girl, giving her a slightly better blanket or an extra piece of bread, only to withdraw it the next day. This keeps you off balance, preventing you from forming alliances. You are all rivals for the few scraps of comfort he might toss out. He isolates you from each other, ensuring that his authority is never challenged by a united front. You learn to read him like a scholar reads a text. You learn the meaning of the twitch in his jaw, the narrowing of his eyes, the particular way he taps his fingers on the table. You learn to make yourself small and quiet when he is in a rage, to feign a cheerful obedience when he is watching. You learn that his rare moments of kindness are more dangerous than his anger, because they are designed to make you hope, and hope is the one thing you cannot afford to have. He is the shadow that looms over every moment of your life. He is the reason you poison your face with lead, the reason you drink tainted water, the reason you sleep on a bed of lice-infested straw. Every misery in your life can be traced back to his greed. He is not just a man, he is the human embodiment of the system that has entrapped you. He is the face of your despair. The jingle of coins is a constant sound in the lupanar, a metallic counterpoint to the hushed conversations and creaking beds. It's the sound of your labor being converted into currency. After each client, you are paid. A few small bronze coins are pressed into your hand. For a fleeting moment, you hold them. They feel cool and solid, a tangible reward for what you have just endured. But they are not yours. As soon as you are able, you must take these coins to the Leno. He sits at his table in the front room, his ledger open before him. You hand over the payment. He sweeps the coins into his large leather pouch and then makes a mark on his wax tablet with a stylus. This is the ritual of your disposance. You see the money, you touch it, but it passes through your hands like water. The standard price for a session in a low-class brothel like yours is a known historical fact, thanks to graffiti found in Pompeian mentions in Roman literature. The typical cost was around 2 asses. To put that in perspective, a Roman soldier earned about 10 asses a day. A loaf of bread might cost half an as, so your price is roughly equivalent to 2 loaves of bread. You are a cheap commodity, accessible to soldiers, sailors, poor laborers, and even slaves who have managed to save a few scraps of coin. The Leno takes it all. Then at the end of the week, or perhaps at the end of the day, he performs a calculation. He totals up your earnings. Then he subtracts your expenses. The rent for your cell, the cost of your food, that stale bread and thin vegetable gruel, a charge for the oil in your lamp, a fee for the coarse dress on your back. The numbers are arbitrary, invented by him to ensure the outcome is always the same. You have earned almost nothing. He then hands you your share. It might be a singles or perhaps a quadrans, the smallest coin in circulation. It's an insulting, almost meaningless amount. This is your allowance. The few pathetic coins that don't cling to the Leno's pouch. What can you do with them? This is where you encounter a strange and fascinating bit of Roman numismatic history. The spin-triaes are small bronze or brass tokens, about the size of a modern quarter, that have been found at various Roman sites. On one side, they depict an explicit erotic scene, similar to the paintings on your cell wall. On the other side, they have a Roman numeral, typically from I to XVI. For a long time, historians and collectors believed these were brothel tokens or whorehouse money. The theory was that a client would buy these tokens from the leno perhaps to overcome language barriers pointing to the image they wanted or to keep official Roman currency, with its pious images of the emperor and the gods, from being used in such a sordid transaction. This theory is very popular and widely repeated. However, this is the subject of a major academic debate. Many modern numismatists and historians now strongly disagree. They argue that there is no direct evidence linking these tokens to brothels. They have never been found in significant quantities during the excavation of known lupanaria. The new, and much more fun, theory is that these were not money at all, but gaming pieces. They were likely used to play a board game, perhaps one similar to checkers or backgammon, in the taverns and bathhouses of Rome. The numbers would relate to the movement of the pieces on the board. The erotic images, they were just a bit of risque decoration, the ancient equivalent of playing cards with pin-up girls on them. So, the idea of a special brothel currency is most likely a myth, a titillating story that has taken on a life of its own. The reality of your financial situation is far less interesting. The few asses you manage to keep are your only connection to the outside economy. You hoard them, perhaps hiding them in a crack in the wall or sewing them into the hem of your straw pallet. They represent a tiny, flickering ember of autonomy. With them, you might be able to buy a small luxury from a passing street vendor, a piece of fruit, a honey cake to break the monotony of your diet. Or you might buy something more practical, like a needle and thread to mend your dress. That the most likely use for your meager savings is religious. You might save up enough to buy a small terracotta offering to leave at a local shrine. You wouldn't dare enter one of the grand temples in the Forum, but there are small, humble shrines in every neighborhood, dedicated to local gods or spirits of the crossroads, Lars compitales, or you might make an offering to a goddess who is seen as a protector of women in your position, Venus, in her more earthly aspects, or the Egyptian goddess Isis, whose cult was immensely popular among the lower classes and promised salvation and a blessed afterlife. You press a coin into the hand of a temple attendant, whispering a desperate prayer for health, for safety, or for the impossible dream of freedom. The coin is gone, but for a moment, you bought yourself a sliver of hope. It's the most expensive thing you'll ever own. Your meager earnings barely cover the debt you owe the leno, let alone provide for any real comfort. The most immediate and visceral reminder of your poverty is the food you are given. While the smells of roasting meat, baking bread, and simmering sauces drift through the streets of Rome, your diet is a monotonous and nutritionally bankrupt rotation of the cheapest calories available. Twice a day, a bowl of something warm is shoved through your doorway. In the morning, it might be a lump of coarse, dark bread. This isn't the fine white bread of the upper classes. It's made from barley or spelt, full of grit and chaff that hasn't been properly sifted out. It's dense, heavy, and often stale. You gnaw on it, the rough texture scraping the roof of your mouth. To soften it, you might dip it in water, creating a soggy, unappetizing mush. The main meal of the day, served in the evening, is usually a bowl of pulse. This is the quintessential food of the Roman lower classes, the bedrock of their diet for centuries before they widely adopted bread. It's a simple porridge or gruel, made by boiling crushed grains, usually spelt or millet, in water. It's thick, bland, and filling in a heavy, starchy way. Sometimes, to make it more flavorful, a few scraps of vegetables might be thrown in, a bit of turnip, some wilted cabbage leaves, or a handful of beans. On a very good day, there might be a drizzle of cheap olive oil on top. This is your sustenance. This diet is a classic example of what historians know about the Roman food supply. While the elite dined on an astonishing variety of dishes, oysters, roasted dormice, flamingo tongues, the urban poor subsisted on the grained oland, whatever else they could afford. The state distributed free or subsidized grain to hundreds of thousands of Roman citizens. But as a woman of infamy, you are likely not on those official lists. You are dependent on the leno who buys the cheapest, lowest quality grain on the market. This brings us to a strange and little-known aspect of the Roman grain supply: the risk of contamination. The massive quantities of grain stored in Rome's public granaries, the HRA, were a constant target for pests like weevils and rats. But a more insidious threat was ergot, a fungus that can grow on rye and other grains, especially in damp conditions. Ergot contains powerful psychoactive alkaloids, and consuming ergot-contaminated flour can cause a condition called ergotism. It has two forms: convulsive ergotism, which causes painful seizures, muscle spasms, and hallucinations, gangrenous ergotism, which affects the blood supply to the extremities, leading to a burning sensation in the limbs known as street. Anthony's fire, in the Middle Ages, and eventually causing the hands and feet to become blackened, mummified, and fall off. The academic debate here is whether major outbreaks of ergotism occurred in the Roman world. There are no definitive descriptions of the disease on a mass scale, but some medical writers describe symptoms that are highly suggestive of it. Given that your leno is buying the cheapest grain available, likely grain that was old, poorly stored, or rejected by others, your risk of consuming ergot-contaminated flour is significantly higher than that of the general population. That strange twitching in another woman's hands, or the bizarre, terrifying dreams you sometimes have, could be more than just stress. It could be the bread you're eating. Your diet is severely lacking in key nutrients. You get almost no fresh fruit. You almost never taste meat. Protein comes from the occasional bean or lentil floating in your gruel. This lack of protein and vitamins has long-term consequences. Your immune system is weakened, making you more susceptible to all the other diseases in your environment. Your gums bleed not just from poor hygiene, but from a lack of vitamin C, the beginnings of scurvy. Your skin is sallow, your hair is brittle, and your energy levels are perpetually low. You are suffering from chronic malnutrition. Sometimes the hunger becomes a gnawing ache that the bland pools can't satisfy. On those days, you might spend one of your precious hoarded coins on a treat from a street vendor. You might buy a Seville a small, sweet cheesecake made with ricotta, honey, and flour, or a sausage from a Bortula a sausage maker. These moments of flavor are explosions of joy in your grey world, but they are fleeting. The sausage, you know, is likely made from the cheapest, most questionable cuts of meat and loaded with spices to disguise any off flavors. But it doesn't matter. It's real food. It's a taste of the life that is happening all around you, the life you are excluded from. You finish a bowl of gruel, scraping the sides to get every last bit. It's heavy in your stomach, a mass of starch that provides calories but no real nourishment. The food you eat doesn't strengthen you, it just keeps you alive enough to continue working. It's fuel for the machine, nothing more. And you are always just a little bit hungry. In the suffocating confines of the lupanar, your only companions are the other women. You are all trapped in the same pit, sharing the same fears and the same miseries. You might think this would create a powerful bond, a sisterhood of the damned. But the reality is far more complicated, a tense and shifting web of rivalry, resentment, and rare, fleeting moments of genuine connection. The leno, as you've learned, is a master of psychological manipulation. He understands that a united group of women would be a threat to his authority. So, he actively cultivates an atmosphere of competition. He might praise one woman's earnings for the day in front of everyone else, shaming those who bought in less. He might give a small favor, a slightly less lumpy mattress, a piece of fruit to one woman, making the others jealous. You are all pitted against each other in a grim contest for his approval, or at least for the avoidance of his wrath. This dynamic is a well-understood feature of life in any oppressive, enclosed institution, from prisons to barracks. Historians who study the social life of the Roman lower classes recognize that survival often depended on navigating these complex micro-hierarchies. In the lupanar, pecking order quickly establishes itself. At the top is Livia, the older woman. She's been here the longest. She knows the leno and she acts as his unofficial deputy. She is the one who instructs the new girls, who enforces the small rules of the house. Her position gives her a small amount of power, which she wields to make her own life slightly more bearable. She can be your greatest source of practical advice or your crudest tormentor, depending on her mood and whether she sees you as a threat. Then there are the hierarchies based on youth and beauty. A new girl, young and fresh-faced, might temporarily become the Leno's favorite, earning more and perhaps receiving slightly better treatment. This breeds resentment among the women who have been there longer, whose bodies are beginning to show the wear and tear of the life. They see the new girl not with sympathy, but as a rival who is pushing them further down the ladder. You learn quickly to be wary of both praise from the Leno and envy from the other women. But amidst the tension and rivalry, humanity flickers. In the quiet, stolen moments in the corridor or the back alley, you share things. You share the precious comb to pick the lice from each other's hair. You share a whispered piece of advice about a dangerous client. You share a folk remedy for a rash or a cough. These small acts of mutual aid are lifelines. They are tiny rebellions against the dehumanizing system the Leno has created. This is where you might encounter a curious and little-known aspect of social bonding in the ancient world: the sharing of curses. If a client was particularly cruel, or if the Leno was especially unjust, you might not be able to react openly, but you could resort to magic. You and another woman might pool your meager coins to buy a lead tablet, a tabula de Ephixion is or curse tablet. On this thin sheet of lead, you would scratch a message to a Thanoic or underworld deity like Hecate or Persephone, calling for them to inflict harm on your target. You would write his name, and then describe in detail what you wanted to happen to him. May his limbs be twisted, may his tongue be silenced, may his guts rot. Then you would fold the tablet, pierce it with a nail, symbolically fixing the curse, and deposit it somewhere you believed was close to the underworld, a spring or a grave. Archaeologists have found hundreds of these cursed tablets all over the Roman Empire. They are a direct, unfiltered voice of popular anger and frustration. The historical debate is about who wrote them. While many were commissioned from professional magicians, the crude grammar and spelling on some suggest they were written by the semi-literate people themselves. Did you and the other women scratch out your own furious prayer on the lead, or did you whisper your desires to someone who could write them down for you? Either way, the act of creating the curse, of sharing that secret, forbidden anger, would forge a powerful, dangerous bond between you. These bonds are fragile. An argument over a stolen crust of bread, a perceived slight, or a moment of favor from the Leno can shatter them in an instant. Trust is a luxury you can't afford. Your closest confidant one day could be the one who reports you to the Leno the next, in exchange for some small benefit. You are all survivors, and survival sometimes requires ugly choices. So you exist in a state of constant social navigation. You learn who to trust with a whispered secret, who to flatter, and who to avoid. You find your allies where you can, in a shared glance of understanding over the Leno's head, in the quiet act of helping another woman bandage a sore, in the shared, silent hatred for your gilded cage. The echoes in the hallway are more than just footsteps and voices. They are the sounds of a complex, desperate search in miniature. A world of women fighting to hold on to some piece of their humanity and each other in the dark. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. The initial shock has worn off, replaced by a dull, grinding routine. You have adapted in a way. You know the rules, you know the rhythms, you know how to survive. But a question begins to form in the back of your mind. A dangerous, flickering ember of a thought: can you ever leave? Is there a way out of this life? The short, brutal answer is probably no. For most women in your position, the lupanar was a life sentence. You are trapped by a combination of legal status, debt, and social stigma that forms a near-perfect cage. If you are a slave, your path is clear: you are property. You can no more leave the brothel than a plough can leave the farm. Your only hope is to be sold to a different master, which is not to a different master, which is not an escape, merely a change of scenery. But what if you are technically a free woman? Many prostitutes were not slaves, but impoverished freeborn women, or former slaves who had been monumentally bertigis, who entered the profession out of debt or desperation. You might have signed a contract with the Leno, binding yourself to his service for a set number of years. But this contract is a legal fiction. The debt you owe him, with its inflators for food and lodging, ensures that you will never reach the end of your term. The finish line is always moving. This practice of debt bondage was a cornerstone of the Roman exploitation economy. Let's say you try to run. You wait for a moment of chaos, a busy night, and you slip out the back door and into the labyrinthine alleys of Rome. Where do you go? You have no money, no possessions other than the clothes on your back, which themselves mark you as a prostitute. Your name is on the census list of infames. You have no friends to turn to. If you did, you likely wouldn't be here in the first place. Every door is closed to you, living in constant fear of being caught by the Lenos thugs or by the vigiles, the city's night watchmen, who would likely return you to your owner for a small fee. Your freedom would be a terrifying, starving existence on the streets, which for a lone woman was often a distinction without a difference. But was escape truly impossible? This is where the historical debate lies. The traditional view is overwhelmingly pessimistic, seeing the life of a prostitute as a dead end from which there was no return. However, some revisionist historians argue that we might be underestimating the agency of these women. They point to certain legal and social loopholes that, in very rare circumstances, might have offered a glimmer of hope. One such path was through a patron. If you were lucky, a wealthy client might take a particular liking to you. He might be so infatuated that he decides to buy out your contract from the Leno. This was not an act of charity. He would essentially be purchasing you for himself, to become his exclusive mistress. You would trade the communal misery of the brothel for the gilded cage of a concubine. Your life would certainly be more comfortable, better food, better clothed, a clean place to sleep, but you would still be entirely dependent on his whims. And when he grew tired of you, you could easily find yourself back on the street, older and with even fewer options. You would find a truly bizarre and little-known potential escape hatch, though it sounds more like a plot from a Roman comedy than a real possibility. Under Roman law, there was a strange provision that if a man caught his wife in the act of adultery, he had the right to kill her lover on the spot. But what if the lover was a person of infamy, like an actor or a musician? In that case, the husband couldn't do a specific, ritualized humiliation. Some scholars have speculated, and this is highly controversial, about a reverse scenario. Could a woman of infamy ever become a respectable wife? There are tales and poems, like those of the poet Propertius about his beloved Cynthia, who was likely a court saint, that romanticized the idea of a prostitute being redeemed by the love of a good man. The overwhelming social convention was against it. A man who married a registered prostitute would himself face social disgrace. But did it ever happen? Perhaps, in the rarest of cases, a man might move with his beloved former prostitute to a distant province where no one knew their past, and attempt to start a new life. It's a romantic, almost cinematic fantasy. The most likely escape, however, was not a happy one. You might be sold to a different kind of master. A wealthy woman might buy a retired prostitute from a Leno to serve as a domestic slave, a hairdresser, a weaver, a handmaiden. Your life of sexual exploitation would be over. But you would simply be entering a different kind of servitude. As you lie in your cell, you weigh these impossible options. The illusion of freedom is a dangerous fantasy. It's a hope that can get you beaten or killed. The smarter, safer path is to crush that hope, to accept your reality and focus on day-to-day survival. You see, the older women, like Livia, they are the ones who have survived. And they survived not by dreaming of escape, but by making themselves useful, by carving out a tiny niche in the brutal ecosystem of the lupa NAR, and AR a tiny niche in the brutal ecosystem of the lupa NAR. They have traded the illusion of freedom for the grim reality of a longer life. It's a terrible choice, and it's the only one you have. The years begin to blur. The cycle of seasons is marked only by the changing temperature of the damp stone walls, colder in winter, slightly less so in summer. You've survived. You've outlasted the young Gallic girl who died of a fever, the Briton who was sold to a military brothel on the frontier. You've become one of the veterans, perhaps even taking on Livia's old role as the cynical, world-weary instructor of new arrivals. But survival has come at a steep price, one paid by your own body. You are growing old. In Roman society, where a woman's value was so often tied to her beauty and fertility, Aging was a source of anxiety, even for the wealthiest matronee for you. It is a professional catastrophe. The changes are slow, then sudden. The cheap, lead-based makeup can no longer hide the fine lines that have appeared around your eyes and mouth. The chronic malnutrition and lack of sunlight have made your skin sallow and loose. Your hair, once an asset, is thinning and streaked with grey. The physical toll of disease, malnutrition, and abuse is etched onto your face. Your teeth, if you still have them, ache constantly. Your joints are stiff and painful, a combination of arthritis and the permanent dampness of your surroundings. This physical decline is a well-documented trope in Roman literature. Satirists like Juvenal and poets like Horace wrote cruel, mocking poems about aging prostitutes, describing their sagging skin, their toothless gums, and their desperate attempts to appear young. They are portrayed as pathetic, grotesque figures, clinging to a profession that no longer wants them. This mainstream literary image reflects a harsh social reality. There was no social safety net, no retirement plan for a woman in your position. As your earnings decline, the Leno's patience wears thin. You are moved from your cell in the main corridor to a less desirable spot, perhaps a smaller, damper room in the back. The new, younger girls get the better places. You are given the clients no one else wants, the drunkest, the meanest, the ones who can't afford the younger women. The price for your services plummets from a few asses to a single, pitiful quadriennes. You have become a bargain basement commodity. This is where you might encounter one of the saddest and most obscure roles in the Roman sex trade, the dietaria. This is a term that historians are still debating, but it appears to refer to an older woman, a former prostitute, who was kept on in a brothel, not as a frontline worker, but as a kind of permanent, live-in servant. What did a dietaria do? She might be responsible for the cleaning, swabbing the filthy floors, emptying the chamber pots. She might be the one who tends the oil lamps, mends the torn tunics, or cooks the miserable pot of pulse for the other women. She is no longer earning with her body, but with menial labor. It's a strange, grim sort of retirement. You are still a prisoner of the lupanar, are still under the thumb of the Leno, but your role has shifted from commodity to drudge. You are haunted by the ghosts of your past, living and working alongside the younger women who are now enduring what you once did. You are a living cautionary tale, a constant reminder to them of where this life leads. The academic debate is how common this was. Was it a rare act of charity by a Leno to keep a loyal, long-serving woman from starving on the streets? Or was it just another form of exploitation, wringing the last drops of utility from a body that was no longer profitable in its original function? Your life becomes one of aches and pains. You move slowly, your back stiff. Your world, which was already small, shrinks even further. You rarely leave the confines of the brothel. The outside world, with its bustling crowds and steep hills, is too much for your tired body. Your existence is reduced to the four walls of the brothel, the endless cycle of chores, and the memories of the thousands of men who have passed through your life, leaving nothing behind but a few coins in the Leno's pouch and a deep, weary ache in your soul. You watch the new girls arrive, their eyes wide with the same fear you once had. You see them paint their faces with the same poison, comb their hair for the same lice, and whisper the same desperate prayers to the gods. You could warn them. You could tell them what the years will do. But what would be the point? There is no other path for them, just as there was no other path for you. Show them their coarse tunic, show them then their coarse tunic, show them to their cell, and watch as the cycle begins anew. Your fading beauty is not just a personal tragedy, it is the final, logical outcome of the brutal economy of the flesh. In the midst of the constant fear of disease and aging, there is one possibility so catastrophic that you rarely even dare to voice it. What if one of the desperate contraceptive methods fails? What if, against all odds, you become pregnant and the equally desperate attempts at abortion are unsuccessful? What happens to a child born in the shadow of the lupanar of the lupanar of the lupanar? The 9 months of pregnancy are a tightrope walk over a canyon of terror. At first you try to hide it, binding your belly tightly, hoping the Leno won't notice, but the sickness in the mornings and the inevitable swelling of your abdomen soon give you away. The Leno's reaction is not one of sympathy, but of cold, hard economics. You are damaged goods, unable to work for the foreseeable future. His anger is a constant, simmering threat. Reduce your food rations to near starvation levels or simply ignore you, leaving you to the mercy of the other women. The delivery, when it comes, is a lonely and terrifying ordeal. There is no midwife, no doctor. You are attended to by Livia or one of the other older women, whose knowledge of childbirth is based on folklore and grim experience. You give birth in your filthy cell, on the same straw pallet where you have slept and worked. The risk of infection, for both you and the baby, is astronomical. Puerperal fever is a common killer of women in all strata of society, and in these septic conditions, it's almost a certainty. But let's say you survive. You defy the odds. You are now holding a newborn baby in your arms. A tiny, fragile life in this brutal, hopeless place. What is its fate? This is where we confront one of the darkest and most common practices of the ancient world: infant exposure. If the baby is born weak, sickly, or is a girl when the Leno might have preferred a boy who could one day work as a bouncer or a servant, the decision is swift. The baby is taken from you. It will be abandoned, exposed at a designated spot in the city, often near a temple, at the base of a column, or, most notoriously, at the local garbage dump. This was a completely legal and socially accepted practice in Roman society. A father had the absolute right, the patria potestas, to decide whether a newborn child would be accepted into the family or discarded. In your case, the Leno is the father, in a legal and practical sense. The hope, the thin justification that people told themselves, was that a passerby might take pity on the infant and raise it as their own child, or, more likely, as a slave. But the reality was grim. Most exposed infants died quickly from the elements, from starvation, or were killed by stray dogs. This practice is a well-established historical fact, a chilling insight into the Roman view of life and family. But what if the Leno decides the child can be useful? If it's a girl, he sees a future asset. A new generation of prostitute, one that he owns from birth, one that will never know any other life and will be bound to him by a debt that begins at her first breath. You are now forced to watch your own child being groomed for the same life that has destroyed you. You will feed her, clothe her, and watch as she takes her first steps in the grimy corridors of the lupanar. It is a unique and soul-crushing form of torture. This leads to a strange and heartbreaking little corner of Roman social history. The alumna, the term literally means nursling or foster child. In many contexts, it was a term of endearment for a child raised in a household who was not a biological heir. But in the context of the lower classes, it often referred to children raised to become slaves or to follow the profession of their caregiver. You might see funerary inscriptions, for example, set up by a Leno for his young alumna who died prematurely. On the surface, it looks like an act of affection, but the subtext is chilling. He is mourning the loss of a future investment. The historical debate here revolves around the emotional bonds in these situations. Were women like you capable of feeling maternal love in such a brutal environment? Or did the trauma of your existence numb you to such feelings? Some ancient writers portray prostitutes as heartless and unnatural mothers, but many historians now argue that this is a cruel stereotype. They suggest that the instinct to love and protect your child would be powerful, even in the most hopeless of circumstances. The secret moments of tenderness, a whispered lullaby, a gentle touch, would be your most profound and painful acts of rebellion. You would be trying to pour love into a vessel that the world is determined to fill with filth. The child grows up in a world without sunshine, without play, without innocence. Its first words might be the curses it hears in the hallway. Its playground is the filthy back alley. It learns the grim economics of the brothel before it learns to read. You see your own trapped existence reflected in its young eyes. To have a child in the lupanar is not to create a new life, it is to condemn another soul to the same living death. It is the ultimate horror, the final turn of the screw in your miserable existence. The body can only endure so much, whether from a sudden, violent fever, a septic infection from a minor wound, the long, slow ravages of a venereal disease, or simply the cumulative exhaustion of a lifetime of abuse and malnutrition. Your time in the lupanar eventually comes to an end. Death is the final, inevitable visitor to your cell. When it happens, it is a quiet, undramatic affair. There is no weeping family, no solemn last rites. You might die alone in the night, your passing unnoticed for hours. Or you might breathe your last with one of the other women, perhaps even Lydia, sitting by your side, holding your hand in a rare, final act of solidarity. The LNOS reaction is one of annoyance, not grief. A death is an inconvenience. It means paperwork, of a sort, and the disposal of a body, albeit one that had likely depreciated to almost zero value. What happens to your body? For a respectable Roman citizen, funeral rites were of supreme importance. The family would hold a procession, hire professional mourners, deliver a eulogy, and cremate the body on a pyre. The ashes would be collected and placed in a funerary urn, which would then be interred in a family tomb along the roads leading out of the city, like the famous Appian Way. These tombs were a statement of family pride and a guarantee of remembrance. Forgetting the dead was a terrible fate. For you, there is none of this. You are infamy, a disgraced in life, and you will be unceremoniously disposed of in death. The Leno is not going to spend money on a proper funeral for you. Cremation was expensive, requiring a great deal of wood for the pyre. Your fate is something much cheaper and grimmer: burial in a mass grave. On the Esquiline Hill, just outside the ancient Servian wall of the city, lay a vast, foul-smelling area that was part graveyard, part garbage dump. This was the location of the porticuli or grave pits. These were enormous open trenches, essentially mass graves, where the bodies of the destitute, the enslaved, and the disgraced were unceremoniously dumped. This is a well-documented historical reality, mentioned by writers like Horace, who described the ground as being whitened with the bones of the poor. Your body, likely wrapped in nothing more than the blanket from your bed, would be loaded onto a cheap cart, the V-spill ones the undertakers for the poor, themselves a profession of infamia, would transport you at night to avoid offending the sensibilities of the citizenry. Your body would then be tipped over the edge of the pit, to lie among the hundreds of other anonymous dead, along with animal carcasses and the city's refuse. There is no marker, no name, no ceremony. The lime thrown over the bodies to hasten decomposition and reduce the stench is your only funerary rite. This is where you encounter a fascinating and slightly macabre detail of Roman funerary practices: the burial club. For many of the working poor in Rome, artisans, merchants, laborers, the fear of an anonymous burial in the porticuli was so great that they formed burial societies, or collegae a funeret, ICIA. These were social clubs where members would pay monthly dues. In return, when a member died, the club would guarantee them a proper funeral, provide a niche columbarium in a communal tomb for their urn, and ensure that commemorative feasts were held in their honor. These clubs were a vital part of the social fabric for the Roman working class, a way of ensuring dignity and remembrance in death. The historical debate is whether a woman like you could have ever belonged to such a club. The general consensus is no. Your infamia and your utter lack of disposable income would have excluded you. The collegae were for the respectable poor, not the disgraced. You were outside of this system of mutual aid, just as you were outside of every other supportive structure in Roman society. You were alone in life, and you would be truly alone in death. Your existence is erased. Your name, already a fiction given to you by the Leno, is forgotten. The graffiti you may have scratched on your cell wall is your only monument, and it will eventually be plastered over. You will become part of the soil of the Esquiline Hill, your bones mingling with the trash of the city you served. You are a ghost, a story with no ending, a life that, according to the official record of Rome, might as well have never been lived at all. The great machine of the empire rolls on, utterly indifferent to your passing. You are finally and completely forgotten. You are forgotten. Your body lies in an unmarked pit, your name erased from memory. For centuries, your story is a complete blank, a footnote in the grand narrative of Rome, known only through the scornful jokes of poets and the cold dismissals of historians. Your voice is utterly silent, and then in the 18th century, A group of excavators digging in the fields near Mount Vesuvius stumble upon a lost city, perfectly preserved under a thick blanket of volcanic ash and pumice. They have found Pompeii, and in Pompeii they find you. Not your body, but your voice. In the ruins of the city frozen in time on that fateful day in 79 AD, archaeologists uncovered a two-story building in one of the city's back alleys. It was a purpose-built structure with a central hall, 5 small cells on the ground floor, 5 more upstairs, and a stone bed built into each room. On the walls were the explicit menu-like frescoes and more importantly, a staggering amount of graffiti, the most famous and well-preserved brothel from the ancient world, and on its walls you had left messages. This is the mainstream, widely known discovery that has shaped so much of our understanding of your life. The walls of the Pompeian brothel are a guest book from hell, a chaotic tapestry of voices. You can almost feel the ghosts whispering as you read the scrolled words. We have the client boasts hic ego puella es molt, des futu. I fucked many girls. A testament to a man named Solly is you fuck well. We have prices and reviews Myrtis, you suck well. For 2 asses, you can get her. These crude messages confirm the grim reality of your commodification. But amidst the male scrolls we find something else. We find your names. Victoria, Fortunata Muller, sometimes just the name, a simple decoration of existence. Felix was here, a client writes. And right below it, a different hand has scratched. Lucella was here too. It's a tiny, defiant echo. A refusal to be just the object in someone else's story. And here we find a particularly fascinating and poignant detail, a piece of graffiti that humanizes you more than any other. It's a more complex message, and its translation is the subject of some debate among classicists. It appears to be a fragment of a conversation or a lament. One potential translation reads Murto, my friend, and I were here. If you want to know our names, they are Fabia and Felicula. It's a simple statement, but it contains multitudes. It speaks of friendship amica, of a shared experience. It's 2 women together, leaving their mark, wanting to be known not by their professional names, but their real ones. It's a crack of light in the overwhelming darkness. The academic debates surrounding this graffiti is intense. Who wrote it? Were the women of the Lupa enough to write these messages themselves? Literacy in the Roman world was not a simple yes-no question. There were varying degrees. Many people in the lower classes possessed a functional literacy. They could perhaps scroll their own name, read simple signs, and understand numbers. It's entirely possible that you could have scratched your own name in a simple phrase onto the plaster, or perhaps you dictated it to a more literate friend or even a sympathetic client. Furthermore, what was the purpose of this writing? Was it purely personal, a desperate need to feel real? Was it a form of internal advertising, building a reputation within the brothel's clientele? Or was it, as some have argued, a form of resistance? A way of humanizing a space designed to be dehumanizing, of claiming a tiny piece of the wall as your own. When you write Victoria was here, you are no longer just the nameless girl in cell 3. You are Victoria, and you have a history. The graffiti of Pompeii gives you a voice, but it's a fragmented, ghost-like one. It tells us your names, but not your stories. It hints at your friendships, but not your deepest feelings. It records your price, but not your price, but not your pain. It's a collection of whispers, echoes caught in the ash. But it's more than history had ever given you before. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, you are not just a stereotype in a satirical poem. You are a person who could write her name on a wall. A person who lived and breathed and felt, and who, in a fleeting moment, managed to send a message out into the future. The excavators in Pompeii weren't just digging up a ruined city. They were digging up your forgotten voice, and finally, after centuries of silence, the world began to listen. That whisper from the walls of Pompeii is a miracle. It's a message in a bottle, washed ashore after 2,000 years. But it is just a whisper. A name, a price, a boast, a brief cry of friendship. It's not a story, it's not a life. To find the rest of your story, return to the grand histories of Rome, The leather-bound volumes written by men like Tacitus, Livy, and Suetonius. We search their indexes for your name, for Victoria, for Fortunata, for Fabian Felicula, and we find nothing. You are completely, utterly absent. These men wrote the history of the empire, but they wrote about the history that mattered to them. They wrote about wars and conquests, senate debates and imperial succession, triumphs and conspiracies. Their history is carved in marble and written on expensive papyrus scrolls. The great men of Rome didn't just ignore you, their worldview was constructed in such a way that you were not even considered a part of history. You were part of the landscape like a stray dog or a loose cobblestone. You were the human cost of the glorious civilization they were so proud of, and they had no interest in calculating that cost. This is the ultimate mainstream fact of your legacy, your almost total invisibility in the traditional historical record. This erasure wasn't just a passive oversight, it was reinforced by the very structure of Roman law and society. Here is a final, chillingly bureaucratic detail of your forgotten status. The law of infamy did more than just silence your voice in court. It followed you to the grave and beyond. A Roman citizen's legacy was secured through their will, through the passing of property and memory to their children. You, as a person of infamy, were severely restricted in this. You could not inherit property from a respectable citizen's will. You existed outside the lines of legitimate succession and legacy. You were a dead end, a branch of the human family tree that was deliberately pruned. You couldn't receive a legacy, and you had nothing to leave behind. Your erasure was not an accident of history, it was a feature of the system. So where does that leave us, the people in the future trying to understand your life? It leaves us in the middle of a profound and ongoing academic debate. On one side, you have historians who believe that we can, through careful and creative work, recover your story. They are historical detectives piecing together clues from archaeology like the Pompeian graffiti, from medical texts, from court records describing property disputes over women like you, and by reading the works of the satirists against the grain. They believe that by assembling all these fragments, they can create a plausible mosaic of your life and even find moments of your agency and resistance. On the other side are more skeptical historians. They argue that the source material is so thoroughly contaminated by elite male bias that any attempt to reconstruct your inner world, your thoughts, your fears, your friendships is ultimately an act of fiction. They argue that we can describe the grim conditions of your existence, but we can never truly hear your voice. We are just putting our own modern emotions and ideas into the mouths of historical ghosts. Are we historians, they ask, or are we novelists filling the silences with our own imagination? This debate will likely never be resolved, and perhaps that is your truest legacy. You are not a statue in a museum or a chapter in a history book. Your legacy is the silence itself. It's the ghost in the machine of the Roman Empire. It's the question mark that hangs over the gleaming marble forums and triumphant arches. You represent the vast, voiceless majority of humanity whose lives were consumed to fuel the ambitions of the powerful. Your story is a haunting reminder that what is written down is not the whole story. The most important histories are often the ones that were never recorded, the ones we have to listen for in the silence. And now even that silence begins to fade. The story is told. The journey is over. As you lie there, in the quiet of your own room, feel the weight of that life, the one you've been carrying for this past hour, begin to lift from your shoulders. The rough stone of the cell softens and dissolves. The cold, damp air warms and clears, and the endless, echoing hallway fades into a quiet mist. The harsh, smoky scent of the oil lamps is replaced by the clean, simple smell of the night air coming through your own window. The past becomes a distant shoreline, and you are drifting now on a slow, quiet current, away from the noise and the grit of ancient Rome. The names Victoria, Livia, Fortunata become soft, hazy murmurs, like words from a half-remembered dream. Their pain is no longer your burden to carry. Their struggle is over. After a life of constant noise and fear, the woman whose life you shared for a short one has found the one thing she was never allowed: true, undisturbed peace, lost to time, and you can be at rest too. There is nothing left to see, nothing left to learn. There is only the soft hum of the world around you, the gentle rise and fall of your own breath. Sleep now. The end of the article. Good night.